45 minutes until the aerial bombing of Undisclosed. We spilled out of the elevator onto the first floor. Carlos and Anna stayed behind, Carlos holding the door open. I said, I don't want this to come off as a lack of confidence on my part, but you might consider trying to get out of town. Just, on the tiny chance that the three of us are unable to thwart the plans of the most powerful fighting force on the planet. Carlos shook his head. Got people I can't leave behind. We're all counting on you now, including little Anna here. God damn it. We turned and headed for the front door. I noticed that Molly stayed behind with Anna. I wondered if she hadn't chosen the better team. In the lobby, John said, Stop. To Amy, he said, We need you to open the box for us. I said, No. Oh, no. We got no choice, Dave. Absolutely not, John. I thought we were toting this around just to make sure the bad guys didn't get it. It would be irresponsible to what? Risk damaging something? Dave, they're going to blow all this to hell. If there was ever a time to use it, this is that time. I reluctantly sat the green mystery box on the floor. Outside, thunder rumbled. To John, I said, I can't see the latch, can you? Yeah, I can now. I said before there was no visible latch or lock on the box. That was true. But there was an invisible one. I stared at the front of the box and focused. If I stared hard enough, a simple lever swam into view. It had been a long time since I'd taken soy sauce. I assumed John could see it clearly. You might have heard about amputees feeling a phantom limb beyond their stump. The nervous system sending back false reports that gives the illusion that the appendage is still there. Well, if John looked at Amy's missing hand, he would see a literal phantom limb. A translucent hand. If she closed her eyes and concentrated on opening and closing the hand and flexing the fingers, John, and anyone else under the influence of soy sauce, would see the fingers flex, even though Amy herself would probably not. Amy's abilities came and went. She had never taken the sauce, but I think she caught some effects from me due to transfer of bodily fluids. She squinted and said, I can see the latch, but just barely. It's just a shimmer, like the Predator. Amy had done the trick with the box lever once before. She leaned over and, to an outside observer, held the stump of her left wrist a few inches from the box. To John's eyes, her phantom hand grasped the hidden lever and pulled. A click. The lid rose slowly on its own. Inside the box was what looked like a gray lump of fur the size of a football. It was actually metal, and the fur was thousands of rigid metal strands, thinner than needles, standing straight up. The first time I saw it, I said the thing looked like a steel porcupine. John said it looked like a wig for a robot. The only part of the device not covered by the metallic fur was the simple metal grip at the end, where it could be picked up. On the handle was a trigger. It was a gun. What did it do? Well, back in the summer after we lifted the box from the convoy, we had brought it home and spent several days figuring out the ghost latch. We then stared at the object inside for a bit and debated what to do. John dubbed the thing the fur gun because we had decided it was some kind of weapon, and of course, it had that metal fur on it. Then, late one night, John and I had gotten good and drunk and taken the fur gun out to a field to test fire it. John set up 3 green Heineken beer bottles on a log, then pointed the furry gun thing and squeezed the trigger. The device made a sort of honking sound, like some people make when they blow their nose. There was a strange ripple in the air, like the heat-warped space above a fire. The beer bottle on the far right was suddenly 5 times bigger than it was before. John had cheered and whooped and declared the device to be an enlarging ray. He said he'd point it at cornfields and use it to cure world hunger. He fired it again, aiming at the next bottle. It stayed the same size, only turned white. When we approached it, we realized the bottle had been turned into a bottle-shaped pile of mashed potatoes. John stated he would still use it to cure world hunger, but more importantly, he pointed out that he had been thinking of mashed potatoes at the exact moment he had pulled the trigger, and speculated that the gun could react to your thoughts somehow. We fired it at the 3rd bottle, and it immediately turned into a double-ended dildo. A black one. John said this confirmed his theory. He had then handed the fur gun to me, and I fired at the first bottle. That bottle, and the dildo, and the log, and the ground, all were consumed in a ball of fire so bright it looked like a miniature sun had landed in the middle of that field. The blast was so intense that John and I were blinded for half an hour after, and saw blue-white spots in front of our eyes for most of the day. When the fire subsided, there was a 20-foot circle of earth in front of us that had been scorched into black glass. The papers said the light was reported by witnesses 6 miles away. The next morning, we had sat at my kitchen table, my head pounding, eating Amy's macaroni and cheese-filled omelets and staring at the green box in front of us. John said, "I want to try it again tonight." Amy shook her head. "Come on, somebody's going to get hurt." I said, "Yeah, it clearly doesn't work." John said, "We don't know that. We just have to learn how to use it." I shook my head. "No. Remember the truck and what happened to the guys guarding the thing? If they couldn't control it and they built the damn thing, well, in our hands, we might as well be cramming gunpowder and ball bearings up our assholes." John said, "See, I've got a different theory. I don't think they built it. I think they found it and had no idea what to do with it. But here's the thing. At the moment when you were taking your piss turn off the tower, I was thinking back to the best birthday present I ever got. I was 9, and my uncle had gone to a garage sale and found, for $10, a cardboard box of G.I. Joe action figures. Even had all their guns, backpacks, everything. There were more than 30 of them in there. Somebody's entire collection. Then, well, you saw what happened to them in the truck. I made that happen, Dave. With my mind. From 1,000 feet away. We can master this thing. We just need practice." Amy said, "You almost started a forest fire." Dave did. We'll be more careful next time. Amy sat a plate in front of him and said, "Uh-huh. You just turned a truck full of people into toys. But either way, good luck opening the box without me." Needless to say, it was never opened again. Until today. I reached in and took the fur gun by the handle. John said, No." "What?" "I actually agree that the gun isn't safe in your hands. Give it to me." Amy said, "I'll take it." She did. I said, "What am I supposed to use?" John said, "We shouldn't have to use anything at all. We get to a door, one of the wormhole doors, and we go right to the water tower. We break their jammer thing. Everybody's phones work again. The world sees the city isn't full of zombies, and the bad guys got no choice but to call off the bombing. Tenet goes to jail, and we all go to Waffle House and have breakfast. I nodded at the fur gun and said to Amy, "We run into anybody? Point and imagine something non-lethal. Just imagine you're Dumbledore casting that spell that knocks people's weapons out of their hands but doesn't hurt them." She sighed and said, "You think I'm 5? John said, "All right, I'm thinking we can't use BBs because there's probably a huge mob there by now. And I'd prefer to not have to shotgun 24 rednecks today. What's the next closest door?" "No, think, John. We went through a door and came out here, right where we needed to be. You made that happen. Because of the soy sauce, you have control. You can control the doors the way they do. We'll go back to the door we came in, the one out on the lawn. You're going to concentrate, and I know you can do this. You're going to concentrate on the water tower porta potty, and it's going to take us right there. Right?" Thunder rumbled outside. The wind picked up, and the arthritic old building creaked under the strain. John nodded and said, "Right. This is going to work." We ran to the front door. We dragged away the cabinet we'd used as a barricade. I took a deep breath, opened the front door, and was immediately staring down a dozen gun barrels. Armed townspeople were swarming the scene. Amy said, "Don't shoot!" I put my hands in the air and, to the firing squad in front of me, said, "I know you're all worked up, but listen to me. The feds aren't going to bomb the hospital. They're going to bomb the whole town. That means as of right now, we are all in the same boat. As far as the rest of the world is concerned, all of us are infected." The guy nearest to me, a big black guy who was built like a linebacker, said, "Drop your weapons and lay flat on the ground. This is the only warning you get." Then I noticed the earmuffs everybody was wearing. I took a deep breath and screamed, "They are going to bomb the town in an hour." I tried to pantomime a plane dropping a huge bomb, but I think the motions conveyed that I was warning about a bird shitting on his head. No response. To John and Amy, I muttered, "I'm thinking we need to go back inside." Under his breath, John said, 1, 2, 3. We spun and ran back through the big wooden doors, and I ran gut first into a rusting Ford sedan. Amy slammed into my back. I looked around and realized that we were not, in fact, inside the main hall of the asylum. Rows of broken cars grew in a field of yellow weeds all around us. John cheered. "Ha! It worked! Screw those guys." Amy said, "This is not the water tower." It was, in fact, the junkyard south of town. John and I spun around at the same time and saw the blue porta potty standing in the weeds behind us. "Damn it," said John. "They moved the shitter. What is this, the junkyard? We're way the hell on the other side of town." The first sprinkles of rain were coming down. I took a calming breath and said, "It's okay. You're going to concentrate, and we're going to go back into the porta potty, and you're going to send us to the water tower. There has to be a door there we can come up out of. You're going to send us to that door, any door in the vicinity. You are not going to send us back to the asylum, right? Something changed with the light, like a shadow was passing overhead. I looked up, and for the second time that day, saw that a car was flying toward me through the air. We ran screaming in 3 directions as a rusting sedan flattened to the porta potty with a thunder of rending metal. I stumbled, fell, and got a face full of dried weeds. I scrambled to my feet and screamed for Amy. Found her crouching behind a hatchback. John screamed, "There! There!" And we turned to see a shrunken, dried-up old man who looked about 90. He was maybe 25 yards away, standing near a 20-foot-tall faded fiberglass statue of a smiling man holding a slice of pizza. The old guy looked completely normal, other than the fact that he had a huge third arm growing from his groin and had massive, leathery wings. The old man bent over and with his dick arm... Sorry. Wrestled an old engine block out of the dirt. He shrieked and threw the engine at us underhand like a softball. The 400-pound hunk of metal turned in the air, little sprays of rainwater flying out of its cylinders. We dodged again, moments before the engine crushed the roof of the hatchback in a cloud of glass bits. John's shotgun thundered next to me. It had absolutely no effect on the old man. I don't know if he missed or if the old guy was immune to bullets. John broke open the gun and fumbled with 3 more shells. 2 of them fell into the weeds. "Amy, shoot him!" Amy turned, raised the fur gun, closed her eyes, and fired. The alien gun made that low foghorn honking sound. The air rippled. The old man recoiled, his hands flying to his face. When his hands came away, I observed that he now had a thick, white wizard beard. John screamed, "God damn it, Amy, you've got it set on beard!" The man advanced. Amy fired again. The man's beard grew twice as long. I yelled, "Amy, you can go lethal on this one. I'm trying." The old man was running now, terrifyingly fast, arms pumping, running right at us. We ran away. Amy tried to turn and fire the fur gun. The shot went wild, and suddenly the fiberglass pizza man had a beard. I screamed, "Give it to me!" Amy tossed the fur gun. Before I could turn on the old man, I was sent sprawling with a blow to my back that knocked the air out of my lungs. I hit the weeds, gasping. I rolled over to see the old man ready to swing a car bumper at me a second time. I pointed the fur gun up at the old fart. I squeezed the trigger. The gun went off with a booming sound that shook the earth. There was a gut-wrenching impact, and the man was disintegrated into a fine, red mist. The grass burned in the spot where he had stood. The soil itself charred. John walked up and said, "Jesus, Dave, why don't you, give that back to Amy?" Amy said, "The toilet! The car flattened the toilet!" "We don't need it." I looked at John. John just needs to concentrate. "Hey, it worked the last time. They just moved the..." I know. You're doing great. Now, just find something we can go through. The doors aren't random. Not for you. You have the power to control them. John jogged down the row of cars, rain plinking off of metal trunk lids. He arrived at a windowless van, took a moment to concentrate, then pulled open the doors. John said, "I think I can see it. I can actually see where it goes." "Okay, great. Where?" "I can't tell, but there's an army truck parked there." "Perfect. Go." We climbed through and tumbled out of the back of a different van in the rear parking lot of some restaurant or other. It was certainly not the water tower. 40 minutes until the aerial bombing of Undisclosed. I punched the air and cried, "God damn it, why are we such fuck-ups?" There were in fact 2 military trucks parked nearby, so we had that part right. No personnel in sight. Amy said, "Go back." John said, "No, we have to find a different door. That'll just take us back to the junkyard." John jogged toward the restaurant and went through an open employees-only door. We followed him into an empty kitchen, stainless appliances and grease-tanned walls. It smelled like detergent and vaporized animal fat. We passed into a main dining area full of small, round tables. The building was silent. The restaurant closed. Probably had been since outbreak. We could hear the soft drumming of rain on the roof. Along one wall was a bar lined with bottles and 2 big screen TVs that would be showing some kind of sporting event if it weren't early morning on a Monday during the apocalypse. The opposite wall was covered with a mural depicting a smiling cartoon buffalo eating a burger. "Oh, Buffalo Burger," John said, unnecessarily. We had all eaten here before. Yes, the burgers were made from buffalo meat. And we were apparently going to be incinerated here. "Find a door, John. Glass shattered. We all ducked, and there was a chubby, balding guy in his 50s on the sidewalk out front, wearing earmuffs. He had bashed in the glass front door with the butt of a shotgun. "Shit!" The guy ducked through the shattered glass and racked a shell into his shotgun. "Hey, we're unarmed. We're not infected." The guy put the shotgun to his shoulder. He knew exactly who we were. We dove behind the bar. A shotgun blast shattered 3 bottles, bringing a rain of liquor and glass. Amy blindly stuck the fur gun up over the bar and squeezed the trigger. A small wheel of cheese landed softly on the bar and bounced to the floor. "God damn it, Amy, lethal!" A shotgun blast punched the bar, flinging chunks of particle board between us. Amy raised the fur gun, squeezed her eyes in concentration, and fired. The gun honked. The air rippled. A huge black blur the size of a minivan flew through the air above us, a furry shape that bellowed with sort of a grunting moo. In the split second it was airborne, I somehow registered what the object was. A buffalo. And I mean a real buffalo, huge and furry, and trailing a stink like wet dog. The buffalo hurtled toward the man, its dangling feet flailing as it soared through the air. It smashed into the bald guy, flinging him aside, then blew through the door behind him, wrenching it off its hinges. "Yeah!" screamed John triumphantly. "That's what you get! That's what you get!" The buffalo turned on us, It snorted, belched, farted, and sneezed. It charged back into the restaurant, loping across the floor tiles, each hoof landing with a sledgehammer impact that I could feel in my gut. Amy screamed. The beast blasted a swathe of carnage through the dining room, tossing aside tables and chairs like they were doll furniture. We scrambled to our feet and tried to run. I made it out from behind the bar, then tripped over a chair and fell, taking Amy with me. She rolled over, leveled the fur gun at the beast, and fired. The buffalo recoiled, stopping in its tracks. It suddenly had a thick beard streaked with gray, as big as a man's torso. "Run!" I don't remember who said it, but none of us needed to be told. We dodged and juked around tables, jumping over the unconscious bald guy, rounding the buffalo and heading for the street. I was trying to get turned around, knocking over 6 tables in the process. We flew through smashed doorway, emerging onto a sidewalk downtown. Rain hammered the street, soaking our clothes. 2 seconds later, the buffalo blew through the door behind us, tearing off another foot of door frame on every side. We ran across the 4 lanes of street, looking for cover, or, better yet, a door. I turned to Amy and screamed, "Here, give it to me!" I took the fur gun. I squeezed the trigger, and for a second, nothing happened. The beast charged, hoofs drumming across the pavement. Then, out of nowhere, the buffalo was hit by a semi. The truck splattered buffalo guts 30 feet in every direction as it plowed through the screaming beast. It finally skidded to a stop, scraping a half-ton of buffalo meat along the pavement and leaving a crimson skid mark of blood and entrails that stretched for a block and a half. We all stood and looked at this with disgust for a moment. Amy said, "Gross." John said, "Over here." He was running into the alley toward a dumpster. He stood up on a crate, took a moment to gather his energies, and threw open the lid. "Boom! That's it! I see water tower, bitches!" John climbed in. I helped Amy up next. I stepped up on the crate and looked down. I saw it. That is, instead of garbage, I saw open landscape. Patches of wet green grass and mud puddles. It was dizzying, looking down and seeing the horizon at my feet. Rain was falling on the back of my neck, and falling perpendicular to that inside the universe of the dumpster. I threw my legs over and stepped through, and felt that roller coaster flutter in my guts as gravity changed, and I stumbled forward as the ground rushed up at me, smacking my palms. I was suddenly on my hands and knees in mud, cold rain pounding down my back. I got to my feet, soaked from head to toe, mud caked on my knees and shoes. I squinted through the pouring rain. Thunder rumbled overhead. The water tower was right in front of me. I looked around for the truck John described and found it. A big, black semi-tractor trailer. Next to it was a black military troop transport. Next to it was a black Humvee. Next to it was another. Then about 3 dozen more. John said, "Oh, shit." The water tower construction project was now the home to the makeshift Reaper Command Center. Black military vehicles and mobile homes and tents stretched out as far as we could see. And standing around us were dozens and dozens of guys in black spacesuits carrying assault rifles. All of them were currently screaming at us to drop our weapons and lay flat on the ground. A man strode up in a white spacesuit, carrying a helmet under one arm. His gray hair was still somehow perfectly combed, even under the bombardment of the rain. Dr. Tennant glanced at his watch and said, "I was starting to think you wouldn't make it." 37 minutes until the aerial bombing of Undisclosed. We were hauled under a tent, an open one like you'd see at a county fair. There were 2 long folding tables, and along the back of the tent, just outside of the rain, were a series of carts holding stainless steel canisters. There were 2 spacemen right behind us, holding some kind of weapons on us that I didn't recognize. They were bulky and ended in some kind of slanted lens thing. I kind of wanted to get shot with one just to see what it did. Then, 50 feet or so outside the tent, were a dozen gunmen with regular old military-grade assault rifles. I was 100% sure that their instructions were that if we overpowered the 2 guards next to us, they were to turn everything, including the guards, into the finale of Bonnie and Clyde. Tennant strode up from behind us and handed Amy a towel. Not sure why John and I didn't get one. Tennant said, "I have good news and bad news. The good news is that we are, of course, outside of the blast radius, though close enough that the noise will be very, very loud. Unless someone at the Air Combat Command has made a grievous error in their calculations. A series of 25,000 bombs will be dropped from the back of C-130 aircraft, starting from the center of town outward, in a series of concentric circles. The shockwave from each bomb can shatter 10 city blocks and liquefy any organism standing within 1,000 feet in any direction. Once all the structures have been blown into kindling, a second squadron of B-52 bombers will drop a series of 1,000-pound CBU-97 incendiary cluster munitions, releasing a flammable aerosol that will ignite and raise the temperature at the center of town to a temperature hotter than the surface of the sun. The resulting conflagration will inhale so much surrounding oxygen that from here, we'll feel like we're in a monsoon. Winds will reach 50 miles an hour. I'm told the noise of all the air rushing to feed the massive open-air furnace sounds like the world itself is howling in anguish. It should really be something." John said, "And let me guess, you're going to jerk off while you're watching it, and you're going to make us watch you." Amy was actually using the towel to dry her hair, and I felt like she should have just left it wet out of solidarity. Ignoring John, Tennant said, "That's the good news. The bad news is that you are, of course, being charged for this session." He went back to the row of steel canisters and examined them. I kid, of course. I said, "So how do you get into the supervillain business anyway? Is it something that happens gradually, or do you just wake up and decide to go for it?" Tennant said, "I'm going to let you in on a little secret, and I apologize ahead of time because learning this will mark the end of your extended childhood. Nobody involved in a conflict thinks they're the villain. And considering I'm on the verge of saving a couple of billion lives, I'm thinking I deserve hero status on this one, even if you're too short-sighted to understand." I said, "Uh-huh. So, who is the bad guy then?" "Everyone, depending on the day. In this case, I don't know who is responsible for the parasite. That is, I don't know their names. This is what you can't, or aren't willing to, understand. You found a cockroach in your hamburger. You want a 2-word answer to the question of who put it there. Well, it's not that simple. Was it the kid working the grill who didn't check the beef? Was it the franchise owner for buying beef from a shady supplier? Was it the slaughterhouse for failing to adhere to contamination standards? Was it the government for not funding FDA enforcement of those standards? Or was it you, the customer, for demanding lower taxes that resulted in that funding being cut, and for participating in a consumer culture that rewards cutting corners. Well, in that scenario, think of me as the harried assistant manager who has to apologize to the unhappy customer and try to keep the restaurant from getting shut down. Only here, the restaurant is all of civilization. I said, okay, wait, what does the hamburger represent again? My point is, I have a job just like you. I get a paycheck, I get memos. Just like you, I have superiors, and they have superiors who I am not allowed to speak to. Orders filter down from on high, arriving at my level stripped entirely of all context or rationale or justification. Orders do not come with an illustration of how they serve the overall goals of the organization, same as any other job. Was the parasite released intentionally? And if so, for what purpose? It's not my job to know. All I know is that it is a near certainty that if it gets out, it will destabilize civilization as we know it. I have worked nonstop since the outbreak to contain this in a way that would let the world move on. And, I'm proud to say, I'm on the verge of succeeding. Amy said, by killing everyone. No, not everyone. One medium-sized town. Some perspective helps here. Globally, 150,000 people die every day from natural causes, accidents, war. The population of this town will be barely a blip in the worldwide dying that happens in an average month. So while you think you're being heroic in saving it, you are, right now, in this situation, the villains. I know you don't think you are, but you are. I said, then why are you the one giving this supervillain monologue? He walked back to the silver canisters. He put his back to us and started messing with some mechanism in whatever mad scientist setup he had back there. I heard liquid running. We were not restrained in our chairs, but there were so many guns on us that if I scratched my nose, the shooting aftermath would look like somebody had just spilled a huge lasagna here. I looked at Amy, who was impassive, and then at John, who looked like he was mentally running through escape options just like I was. The fur gun was still laying in the grass where we had landed when we arrived. They probably thought it was a hairbrush. I pictured John trying to wrestle away one of those futuristic lens guns the two guards behind us were carrying. Then I pictured him squeezing the trigger and a cartoon boxing glove popping out of the end. I watched Tenet work fluids from his steel canisters and wondered if we weren't choosing between quick death under a hail of bullets or something much, much worse caused by whatever he was brewing up there. He turned back to us, striding calmly our way. He placed 3 small styrofoam cups in front of us. We have sugar over there, but I'm afraid we're out of creamer. Coffee. I left mine in front of me. Amy, without asking, had been given a hot cup of water in a tea bag. She dropped in the tea bag and asked Tenet if he had any honey. She is terrible at this. Tenet walked back to the coffee carts and returned with a container of honey shaped like a bear. He said, think. Who allowed the outbreak to occur? Who failed to report the appearance of the parasite to any authorities? Who prevented any containment at your house? Who created the breach at the Reaper Command Center? Who created the breach in the quarantine containment fence? Who has single-handedly spread this infection? John said, we didn't do any of it on purpose. We're just not very good at things. Or it could be that just maybe one can act on what one believes is his own agency, while in reality, perfectly serving the purposes of another. He held up the honey bear. Where do you think this comes from, Do you think bees toiled night and day to make this because they knew we were going to take it away from them and drip it into our tea? Of course not. Because we are a higher life form than they. We can make them serve our purposes, while letting them believe they are serving their own. You have been used like bees. He glanced at me. This was all but explained to you before. Another spacesuit walked in out of the rain and went and got a cup of coffee from the coffee carts. I wondered how he was going to drink it. Tennant continued. Don't get me wrong. I know why you think what you think. I have sons in their 20s. I was there myself once, believe it or not. Because you have no responsibilities, you get to sit back, in school or at your inconsequential service job, and judge the grown-ups on the impossible choices we have to make. Of course, if you were in our position, you'd never go to war, or lay off a factory full of workers, or enlist the help of one murderous dictator to stop another one who's even worse. All moral choices seem easy when you don't actually have to make them. Amy shook her head slowly and said, You can't talk your way into this being anything other than mass murder, and people are going to know. Tennant said, What exactly do you think they're going to know? That the people in town are just people, that this isn't so clear-cut. They're going to know. Even if someone decided that the infection rate down there was something less than 100%, and if they could go to a mountaintop and shout it to the world, it wouldn't matter. Because the people want this. They want their neighbors to be monsters. It's why we lust over news stories of mothers murdering their children and running after conspiracy theories about a government full of greedy sociopaths. If the monsters didn't come, we would have willed them into existence. John nodded and said, Just so they have an excuse to see the burger place. I said, You're several steps behind here, John. Amy sipped her tea and said, The people out there won't believe it if they don't have a choice, if they see it for themselves. Tennant calmly said, I know you came here to try to take out the Warlock Jammer. As the villains in this story, that's exactly what I expected you to do. This would be why we have an entire army protecting it. Amy said, Speaking of which, the guys standing right behind us with the weird guns, do they know that you're going to have them killed too? There's no way you can let all these people wandering around here in their spacesuits just go back home tomorrow, knowing what you did here. Somebody will talk, right? To their wife or their kids. Or maybe they'll go online and blog about it. Maybe cash in on a book deal. Do they know you're going to orchestrate something for them, just like you did for the town? Tennant said, I like you. I do. But think about all of the assumptions you just made. First, you assumed that the men behind you could hear you. Second, you assumed that the men behind you have ears at all. Third, you assumed that the men behind you are even men. Would you like to know what's under the hoods of these decontamination suits? The spacesuit back by the coffee turned toward us. He sat his coffee on the cart and approached our table. Tennant didn't turn to look at him. Whatever was inside the spacesuit reached up and started undoing the clasps around the neck of its red-tinted face mask. Then it pulled open the zipper. The gloved hands then raised and grabbed the sides of its helmet and lifted. 30 minutes until the aerial bombing of Undisclosed. We barely had time to register the face we were seeing before the spaceman pulled out an enormous silver handgun and pointed it at Tennant's head. Detective Lance Falconer said, Freeze, shipbird. Tenet sighed and said, "And who are you?" "Shut up. Call off the planes." "Infecting the whole world to prevent you from putting a bullet through my skull would be an incredibly selfish move on my part." Amy said, "Forget it. We don't need him." John said, "He's right. We just need to turn off the cell phone jammer. Then he won't have a choice. It'll blow the lid off the whole charade." "Stop saying it like that." Tenet looked right at me and said, "Is there something you want to say about this, David, before this man splatters my brains? I've been reading it on your face." I met Falconer's eyes, then Amy's. I said, I am not sure he isn't right." Amy said, "David." I shook my head. "I don't like it. I don't. Amy, you know I don't. But Marconi, he was right. The fuse is lit, and this right here, this is our chance to snuff it out. There has to be a sacrifice. He said that." I looked at John. "John, I'm telling you, he saw all this coming. Marconi knows his shit. And maybe if we'd been smarter, if we'd handled it better, we could have put a stop to it without anybody getting, incinerated. But we just kept fucking up, and it has to end at some point. And preferably some point before an event that could be called an apocalypse." I made air quotes with my fingers. "Guys, we have to grow up and see this through. This is our chance to save the world from itself." John looked at the ground resignedly, and I knew he agreed. Falconer said, "Bullshit. They are not getting away with this." John shook his head and said, "They are, Detective. They really are. Try to put that guy on trial. You'll see. Your witnesses will disappear. Or maybe you'll disappear. Hell, your suspect there will disappear. He's just a pawn like the rest of us. Aren't you?" Tenet didn't answer, but he didn't have to. Amy wasn't listening to us. She was turned, looking over the town, as if to take it in for the last time. Thunder crashed. Rain drummed on the tent. Amy walked out into the rain, looking up into the sky, her hands forming a visor over her eyes. A dozen gun barrels followed her. I said, "Amy, you understand why we have to do this, right?" She turned and said, "Do you mind if we continue this discussion under the table?" "What?" The spacemen outside the tent were suddenly alarmed. One of them was looking up at the sky and trying to get the attention of the others. Radios appeared in hands. Black figures started running. I looked past Amy, squinting into the gray sky. There was, up there, a speck, a shape that I mistook for a bird for the second time in 2 days. The speck grew in the sky, taking on the shape of a tiny, thin, pilotless plane. Amy got down on her hands and knees and scurried under the table. It hadn't dawned on the rest of us what was happening. She said, "David, get down!" A pair of white streaks grew out of the bottom of the drone, zipping across the sky and down, rocketing off to our right. I turned just in time to see the black semi-truck vanishing into a cloud of smoke. The shockwave threw us to the grass, flinging me under the table on top of Amy. A huge piece of debris, I think it was a truck wire, whizzed past the tent, trailing black smoke like a contrail. I was laying in the grass, my ears ringing, Amy's elbow in my face. Her tea had spilled on my shirt. Amy scrambled to her feet, threw her arms in the air, and said to the sky, "Yes! You rule, Shane!" "27 minutes until the aerial bombing of Undisclosed." Falconer wrestled Tennant back to his feet, his gun at his temple. Falconer said, "Well, that fucking settles that." Amy looked down at me. "You know this is the right thing. Even if you don't know, you know it." John said, "Shit, yeah. I'm on Team Amy now." I said, "Who the fuck is Shane?" Tennant said, "That accomplished nothing. That pilot will be convicted of treason. But before he can even be prosecuted, they'll get a hold of him. There will be nothing I can do about it. Do you have any idea what they can do? Maybe they'll inject him with Compound 66. That's a serum that will turn a man into a cannibal. Let him eat his own children before they arrest him." 24 spacemen were on the scene now, guns raised, creeping forward. Falconer got an arm around Tennant's neck and was using him as a human shield. Falconer said, "Call off the planes. It's over." The word call triggered something in Amy's mind, and she dug into her pocket and pulled out her phone. "Hey, I've got bars," Tennant said. "You have absolutely no leverage here, Detective. You shoot me, my men will cut you to pieces. The bombs will drop and nothing will change. I'm sorry your super cop fantasy isn't going to play out like you wanted, but you have no cards left to play here." Falconer repeated his demand, but Tennant went silent. Falconer threatened him with creative bodily violence. Tennant gave no reaction. Minutes passed this way, and I sensed the time bleeding away from the bomber countdown. I glanced nervously at the sky, then back toward the town. And then, in the distance, came the crackle of gunfire. 19 minutes until the aerial bombing of Undisclosed. We all rushed out, looking toward the sound. Down the hill and toward the highway where the Reaper barricades had stood since the morning of the outbreak. A pickup truck had crashed through the barriers and was laying on its side. Reaper spacemen were filling it full of holes. Then a spaceman went down, and another. On the other side of the barricade was the undisclosed angry mob, and they were armed. Amy said, "I think somebody figured out that they were about to be bombed and remembered as zombies in their obituaries." John said, "There, see? It's over. The word is out. You're not going to be able to cover this up, Doctor. Call off the planes." Tennant said, "You would be surprised what they can cover up." I said, "You call off the planes, and he'll let you go. No charges. You get out of the country, change your name, and go retire in Argentina like Hitler." I looked at Falconer and said, "Right?" Falconer said, "Yep, absolutely," in a way that did not convey an ounce of sincerity. To the spaceman behind us, Tennant said, "On the count of 3, if he does not release me, start shooting. If you can get him over my shoulder, that would be nice. But if you have to shoot through me, so be it. This is bigger than me." Falconer withdrew his arm from around Tennant's neck, grabbed something small and black from a pocket, and held it in front of Tennant's face. "Do you know what this is, shipbird?" I didn't, but Tennant nodded. "And you know what happens if I push this button?" Tennant didn't answer, but he knew and didn't like it. "Yeah, I know more than you fucking thought, don't I?" "To me," Falconer said, "look to your right. See that big-ass monster truck thing with the huge wheels? We're all going for a ride." Falconer put an arm around Tennant's neck and dragged him toward the vehicle that did, in fact, look like an armored monster truck. Amy and I followed. John took off the other direction, then came running back with the fur gun. Through all of this, the spacemen kept their weapons trained on us, waiting for an order that never came. To John, Falconer said, "Can you drive this thing?" And before he finished the word thing, John was already behind the wheel. Falconer forced Tennant into the passenger seat at gunpoint, then took the back seat so he could keep the gun pressed to the back of Tennant's skull. I went around and slid in next to Falconer. Amy jumped in beside me and slammed the door. John made the engine of the monster truck rumble to life, and 100 miles away, a seismologist saw the needle on his machine twitch. Amy mumbled, "I cannot imagine the penis of the guy who designed this thing." John said, "Where to?" Falconer answered, "Right down there, past the barricades, inside the blast zone. Let's see if that motivates this asshole to pick up his radio and call off the planes." With no hesitation, John rumbled down toward the area that was about to be bombed into scorched rubble. Somewhere, the ghost of Charles Darwin smiled and lit a cigar.